Welcome to the Thriving Children podcast, the show that helps parents and teachers to put the magic back in child development. Here's your host, Clare Crew.
This is episode number 74 of the Thriving Children podcast. I'm Clare Crew, and today we're talking all about tummy time and why it's a really important experience for our youngsters to have in that first 12 months of life. Now, for those of you that don't know, I'm actually in the process of writing my first book at the moment, and it's actually all about tummy time. And if you've ever written a book before or you've tried to write a book before, you'll know that it can be a very start-stop process, a very love-hate process. And I'm feeling in a bit of a funk with it all right now, to be honest. So what I'm doing is I'm setting aside the next 2 or 3 solo episodes of the podcasts to talk about this topic of tummy time, because it is a really important topic to me. It's a really important area that I think that we need to know more about as carers of babies and as parents of babies. And yet it's a topic that isn't really very mainstream at this point in time. But I also, I haven't dedicated a topic to it before on the podcast, which is hard to believe in truth, but I haven't. And I also think that by actually talking about it and having that interaction with you guys in the Facebook community after the podcast airs, then it's just going to hopefully get me out of my funk a little bit more, boost that enthusiasm. And it's also an opportunity for you guys to ask some specific questions as we delve into this topic a little bit more deeply that you really feel need to be explored within the book as well. So it's also making sure, I guess, that my end product really ticks the boxes that I want it to tick and becomes a really informative and practical, user-friendly resource for people out there. I think tummy time is a topic that if we're a mum, we've heard is important. If we work in childcare in a baby room, we've heard it's important, but we perhaps don't really know much about why. I think the main reason people understand that it's important is to prevent the flat head syndrome, where a lot of babies have got a flat patch at the back of their head, when in actual fact, it goes so much deeper than that. So in this episode of the podcast, I'm really just going to delve into the why tummy time is important. And then the 1 or 2 that follow, I'll get more practical with how it looks at different ages and stages and some ways to make tummy time fun and engaging, particularly if you have a little one who's really resistant to it. So there are 3 main reasons that I feel tummy time is important. And the first one is that it builds strong muscles. So it's through tummy time that a baby has opportunities to develop a really strong body. And it's a process that usually doesn't evolve if they don't have much floor time, particularly in that tummy time position. So if you think about it, during the pregnancy, there's a lot of restricted space and movement. And so babies spend a lot of their time in this slightly curled position, chin to chest. And then following birth, it's time for our little ones to have like a really big stretch. And tummy time really meets that need. So it's a bit like if you do yoga, where you have your pose and your counter pose. So you'll do a position that bends your body one way, and then you'll normally follow immediately after with the counter pose that bends your body in the opposite direction. And it feels really good because I guess it's complementing what you've firstly done. So as the baby stretches out more after birth, their muscles begin to strengthen. And essentially, for that process of strengthening, the stretch has to precede it. So as a baby stretches, then those muscles strengthen. They stretch and they strengthen. They stretch and they strengthen. And so all that stretching and strengthening helps to build strong muscles in many different parts of the body. The neck, the chest, the shoulders, the arms, the back, the hands, and actually even the eyes. There's a lot of valuable visual development that comes through tummy time and through the milestones that often follow with lots of tummy time, like being on hands and knees. So when you've got those strong muscles, you're really laying the necessary physical foundation for reaching those milestones, for rolling, for commando crawling on your tummy, for rocking on hands and knees, for crawling on hands and knees. And all of those milestones further develop those experiences that our baby has, the interactions that they have with the environment around them, the sensory experiences that they have, and of course, further opportunities to strengthen their muscles. So that's point number one. It's about building that strong body and brain very much in a physical way. The second reason that tummy time is really important is because it's necessary for the process of gaining postural control. So if you haven't heard the term postural control before, really it's all about our ability to be upright. So it's about being able to be comfortable, defying gravity and being in that upright position, regardless of our age, regardless of our size. So I guess let's have a look first of all at what happens if we are, 5 or however old and we haven't actually yet mastered that. As a student in a classroom, for example, you might be quite floppy. You might find it really challenging to sit still. You might tire really easily, so you don't have that stamina. That fatigue is a big challenge. You might be a child who is often propping their body up against the wall or supporting their head in their hands when seated at a desk. So they're doing all these things to try and help their body be upright against gravity because they haven't got that inner postural control yet. It's taking effort to be upright. When by the time that we are a toddler and we're walking, obviously it's going to be further refined as we grow, as we do new movements, absolutely. But it's pretty much in place after that first year of life, or the bulk of it is. And so that's what we outwardly see for these children that don't have postural control. Really easy to see. They're propping themselves up. They haven't got head control yet. They're getting really tired and perhaps a bit frustrated that things seem really hard work. And there's also, I think, a more troubling hidden side to poor postural control. And that is, if you don't have postural control, a large portion of your brain capacity is spent doing a dance with gravity in this quest to remain upright. So you've then got less resources on hand to focus, to concentrate, to interact, to learn, to do whatever you need to do in that moment in front of you. So the first year of life really is a time to develop this postural mastery, and it starts from being able to lift up our own head. So that is a key thing that happens. It does happen through holding our babies and through baby wearing. It's not absolutely crucial to have tummy time to gain your head control, but it certainly is an experience that is further supported by tummy time. And then from the lifting the head, you get the lifting of the head and the chest in conjunction together off the floor. That is something that doesn't happen without tummy time. You can't do that on your back. You can't do that when you are being worn in a sling. So essentially in that first year of life, bit by bit, the baby is essentially lifting more of their body off the ground until they're on their hands and knees, and then finally they're up on their feet. And in order to help that process evolve, lots of tummy time is really necessary. It is, as I said earlier when we talked about strong muscles, it really is the foundation for reaching those other physical milestones at the right pace for us. Now, I've just got to add as a side note here that we can't force children to develop postural control. We can help support it. But if we are, for example, teaching a child to sit or strengthening their legs so that they can stand and they can walk independently, that isn't actually postural control. Postural control is an inner journey and one that really can't be rushed. And if we do rush it, if we do rush children through milestones or into certain positions that they're not yet putting themselves into, then what we're doing is we're undermining the development of that postural control. The third reason that tummy time is really important is because it starts the process of integrating our primitive reflexes. Now, in case you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard me speak about them before, I'll just give you a little bite-sized intro to the topic. Primitive reflexes are these automatic movement patterns that we have in response to the world around us, and they are the foundation for a child's development. Primitive reflexes are really important for early development. So there's three main purposes or functions to them. The first is that we have them to assist our movement through the birth canal, to actually help us be born. The second function is that we have them to protect us and help our survival in those earliest weeks and months of life. So one, for example, is specifically connected to the first breath of air that we get after birth. So it's all about survival. And the third function is that they provide the body with enough sensory and motor input for the initiation of higher brain functioning. So essentially, they allow the baby to be like a beautiful little sponge, collecting all of the input through their senses, through movement, through touch, through all of those lovely things. And that kickstarts that process of further brain development. So primitive reflexes are crucial for newborn babies, but they come with a use-by date. So because their function is so directly tied to survival, by the time a child gets to 6 months, particularly by the time they get to 12 months of age, we don't really want those primitive reflexes to be there as part of day-to-day functioning anymore. But one of the challenges is these days, particularly because children aren't getting enough tummy time, is that those primitive reflexes are staying. They're staying well beyond babyhood, and if you aren't doing anything at a later age or stage to directly work on that integration process, to give the brain and body a second chance, then you are going to be stuck with them the rest of your life, essentially. Now, there's a few different ways that these can present with challenges, and it largely depends upon the individual first and foremost, but also on the specific cluster of reflexes that someone still has. So if you've got your primitive or baby reflexes still, you may have struggles with learning, with attention, so that focus that I talked about on my last solo episode is very, very lacking. You may be struggling with behaviour. Your coordination is often off. Some children that I've worked with have got great coordination and are really successful with sports upright, but actually when you get them down on the floor, you can see that that body coordination isn't quite where you want it to be. They may also struggle with their emotional well-being. So they may be someone who is very much of the glass is half empty mentality, no matter how much good is in their lives. They may be someone who's got high amounts of anxiety. And also this can impact on the functioning of our body as well. So things like gut health, digestion, fertility, all those things can very much be challenged by having these reflexes. So the short story is that if a baby doesn't get enough tummy time, the reflexes are way more likely to stick around. And so you can see that in this podcast, I've talked about 3 different benefits of tummy time, but they are very much intertwined. If you've still got your primitive reflexes, you haven't got good postural control, and you may not have muscles that are as strong as what we want them to be. There's all this interplay in amongst these 3 benefits to tummy time. And that often happens in child development. We can't compartmentalize things, but I guess I wanted to shine the light on some different benefits of tummy time that you perhaps have not yet heard about before. And so you can see that tummy time isn't just a thing that happens in babyhood. There really are these consequences that can stay with us for the rest of our lives if we hadn't had enough of it. If you're listening to this, however, down the track and you're going, oh my goodness, my child barely had any tummy time and now they're having certain challenges in certain areas, it's kind of too late for us. Please don't feel that way, because there is so much that you can do down the track to remedy some of what the body didn't get in that first year. Ideally, I want all babies to have an abundance of tummy time, because then it's going to prevent some of these challenges from emerging later on in our children's lives, because we want children to have a life that is full of joy and ease. That's what childhood is meant to be all about. So please don't panic. I will be talking about what you can do if tummy time was missed, specifically through reflex integration programs, but you can actually also just give children opportunities to be on their tummy as well. For example, if you're reading a story to a small group of children or to, just one child, you can lay on your tummy and do that story. Sometimes when I play games in my daughter's classroom with a small group, we lay on our tummy to play the card game. There's so many ways that when you're aware of it, you can just weave it into what you do. Yes, you can get scooter boards out and do all sorts of very specific targeted versions of tummy time, but there's also just little ways that you can sprinkle a little bit more into your life as well. Tummy time is so important in babies' lives. It helps them to build strong muscles, it helps them in the process of gaining postural control, and it also begins that process of primitive reflex integration. If you enjoyed this episode, if you found it beneficial, please share it with other people who have babies in their life that need to hear about how important this practice is. Now, next week's episode is going to be a very exciting special guest. I'm going to keep that under wraps for now, but if you're in my Thriving Children Facebook community, you already know who it is. And stay tuned for my next 2 solo episodes, where I'm going to be diving a little bit more into the practicalities of how to make tummy time work, what to do in certain situations where tummy time is not going well. And I think most importantly, how to just make tummy time fun so that your child can really reap the benefits. That is the end of this week's episode of the Thriving Children podcast. Until next time, be kind to yourself.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving Children podcast. For even more goodness, visit thrivingchildren.com.au.